I think one of the most significant issues that I had was memory loss. And it was quite interesting because it's not something that you immediately understand that you've got. Maybe other people understand it, but you don't understand that you have this problem. And my memory loss was not long-term, luckily. I remembered everything that I needed to be able to work and that kind of thing. But the short-term memory loss was bizarre. And you would do things and literally a few seconds later, I wouldn't remember that I'd done them. When I went back to work, I actually went to the train station. The first day that I went back to work, I went on a train. Sue, my partner, dropped me off at the railway station. And I went in and thought, okay, what do I need? I need to get some money because I didn't have any. So I went to the cash point. I could remember my PIN number. I put my card in. I took, I think, £100 out of the hole in the wall. Okay, now what? Right now I need a ticket. So I went to the ticket machine and I bought a ticket, a return ticket to Northampton. And then, okay, now what? Oh, I know, I need some money. So I went back to the cash machine. I put my PIN number in again. I took another £100 out. And then okay, now I need a ticket. So I went back to the ticket machine and I bought a ticket, a return ticket to Northampton. And only when I went to put that in my wallet, I looked in my wallet and, oh, that's strange. I've already got one. I wonder when I bought that. And it was quite a scary, actually, realization that I had just done something that I had absolutely no recollection of doing, and I could have only done it a few minutes ago. And I had a little bit of a panic at that point in the station. But it turns out it was good because it taught me that I was going to have to cope with this memory loss, and I was going to have to learn how to deal with it. It didn't affect my, I would say, intelligence, although that might sound a bit arrogant, but it didn't affect my intelligence. It just affected like day-to-day things. Even taking medication. Sometimes I would take my medication in the morning and a couple of minutes later, I wouldn't remember that I'd taken it and I took it again. So that's something actually other survivors might care to think about. What we did in the end was my partner made me one of these little boxes, and she put all my medication in Monday morning, afternoon, evening, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So when I looked in that box, if it was empty, I knew I'd had it. And that was literally for the first couple of months, actually. That was the only way that I knew that I'd actually taken my medication. That has got better over time. It's improved massively over time. I have issues now a little bit with trying to find a word. Sometimes I'll be mid-conversation, there's a word that I want and I just can't find it. That could be old age, but it could also be something to do with the cardiac arrest. But it got significantly better over time, and now it's not really an issue.
My cognition in the early days, sort of within the few days of post-arrest, was pretty awful. Once they woke me up from the coma, my memory was on a 3-second loop. My friends nicknamed me Dory. And while I was in hospital, funny story, I ordered a jumper from an advert on social media somewhere, and when I got home from hospital, a jumper arrived, but it wasn't the colour that I'd ordered. So I checked online and I'd actually ordered 2 jumpers at 2 different points while I was in hospital, and 4 Bros tickets for a concert, which we didn't end up going to, but it makes a funny story. The first sort of 6 months, my short-term memory was really affected. I struggled to remember conversations unless I was prompted. My attention span was horrendous. My joined up thinking was horrendous. So I could start a conversation, get distracted, and then not have a clue what I'd been talking about. Over time, though, those things have definitely improved. My short-term memory and my recall of conversations and things is horrendous, and I forget appointments all the time now, which I drive myself nuts with. However, I've learned to cope with my forgetfulness, as have those around me. But I do feel that it does impact my life a little bit. But on the whole, I've learned to cope. It was really difficult to understand why that was happening to me until I sort of really learnt about what had happened to me and the sequelae of that, if that's the right word. Once I understood that and could make adjustments in my life for that, life became a bit easier to cope with, and my memory became easier to cope with. 6 years on, I like I said, still struggle with some things, but on the whole I get by. So and thankfully now I don't order several of the same jumper anymore, although I do forget appointments and conversations. But I now, people prompt me, and I say to people all the time, reminds me of this conversation. And as soon as they remind me, it jumps back into the front of my memory. So still Dory, but not as Dory as what I was 6 years ago.
I think it's been affected quite a bit. I mean, memory wise, I definitely don't have the memory capacity that I used to. It's some days are good, some days are bad, as with anything. But memory wise, like, there's nothing worse than you sort of know what you're trying to say, but you can't remember the next word in the sentence, which happens a lot. I mean, the amount of stuff I forget. I mean, the once, brilliant little story. I came out of my house to go to work, locked the door, or at least I thought I'd locked the door. Got to the roundabout, because there was a little roundabout just at the end of my road. Went round the roundabout. Oh, did I lock the front door? Back home, checked it, I'd locked it. Back in the car, gone out. Have I remembered to lock the front door? Back again. And I did that about 3 times before I finally went, you know what, let's just go to work, because otherwise I'm going to be doing this all day. And so short-term memory, really, really snappy, and it's not brilliant. And work decided that because I was struggling to remember some sort of things, I'm having to remember formulas and little measurements and stuff like this. And they actually got one of the operators that I work with to sort of be like a memory bank almost for me. So if I need to remember anything, I ask her, and she just repeats the information I've told her. So that's one of the coping strategies I've sort of had working the 12-hour days that I do, and that's been vital for me. But yeah, attention wise, it's some days I'm good, I can focus. Other days it's just complete blank space up there at times, I feel. So yeah.
So in the early days, my cognition was very poor. I would swear uncontrollably, which was completely out of character. I could remember things long term, but my short term memory was almost non-existent. I was extremely repetitive and had no short term memory really to speak of at all. So people could talk to me, and within 2-3 minutes, I would completely forget that we'd had that conversation. But as time went on, I learned to read, which actually I don't normally read very much, but I was reading. I was doing crosswords, which also really helped me. And luckily, my memory improved over time. It's very hard for me to cope with my memory. Obviously, I have a degree. I have to learn lots for my job at work. And I found this extremely frustrating at work, that I couldn't remember things. So my coping mechanism was to have lots of post-it notes everywhere to trigger memories for me. And I had a very, very supportive team at work and a very supportive team at home. Luckily now, nearly 5 years on, I feel my memory isn't back to how it was. I still do suffer some short-term memory loss, but it's much, much better than it was 5 years ago. I still use those post-it notes, but not to the degree that I used to use them. I do struggle with new things to learn, whereas before I would have just read things and remembered them quite quickly. Now I perhaps have to read things 5 or 6 times. I've learned to adapt to this. I still lose very basic words at times, and I'll get my words muddled, especially when I'm tired. For example, even the other day, I said to my son, get the beans out the freezer instead of meaning out of the microwave. But again, part of that might be my age. I'm not quite sure. But thankfully, over time, my memory has really improved, and I've just learned to adapt with what my memory is.
by training and career, I'm a journalist. So I used to be very, very sharp on the phone or face to face with people and doing interviews and that kind of thing. Okay, my age has probably had an effect as well. But I did find when I first came home, came out of hospital, my memory was very patchy. Things like one morning, probably about 2 weeks after I came home, my wife was looking for her van keys to go to work, and I absolutely denied seeing them. And apparently I put them in the fridge. I have no memory of it whatsoever. Words, I often start sentences still now, and I'll get halfway through and I forget what I'm talking about and what the next word was, or I pick up a thing and I forget it's a pencil, and I literally cannot remember the word, and then it might come to me and it might not. Or if I'm on the phone speaking to someone, I'll say, you know, a long thing with lead in it. Yeah, it really it's crazy. So I get a little bit muddled sometimes when I'm thinking about stuff. I do get a little bit stressed if a lot's happening around me, and if I'm dealing with 2 or 3 things at work. I sometimes have to just stop myself, take a deep breath, clear my head and start again, if you like. So you learn coping strategies, you learn to deal with the way you're not thinking compared to how you would think, or you think you used to think. It's a bit odd. It can be odd at times, but most of the time, you know, I manage. My wife's incredibly patient, and the team I work with are really lovely people. A lot of it we do from home anyway these days, and we have a lot of Teams calls, but they're very supportive. They understand. So I feel like, you know, I'm in a good place, to put it that way. So yeah, cognition, not as good as it was, but I'm managing, I cope.